So today I'm going to be walking through how I made this Ahsoka inspired outfit. The shorts pattern is available on my Etsy and the top pattern will be available soon as part of my mix and match patterns. I've tried to make everything as beginner friendly as possible and I think that's everything, so let's get on with the video. So I'm going to start by working on the top, and for this I'm going to be using a mixture of my mix and match sleeves patterns and my mix and match tops. So in terms of fabric for this one, these are all a 4-way stretch jersey. They have got a few different compositions. So this one I believe is a 95% cotton, 5% elastane, as is this one. But this one is a 95% polyester, 5% elastane. But as long as they're all a 4-way stretch jersey is absolutely fine. These two I got from Fashion Formula. I had them custom printed. This is for the sleeves and this is for the front of the top. And then this one I just got from Jelly Fabrics, just a base orange fabric that is going to work as the lining. I'm also going to be using some pins, some fabric scissors to cut out my pattern pieces, fabric pens to draw out my pattern pieces. I'm going to be using some flat braided elastic. This is 5 to 6 millimeters wide. This is optional, but it will add a little bit of extra structure to your top. I'm going to be using some shearing elastic just to gather down the front of the top. You could just use normal thread for this. And then I'm also going to be using some interfacing for the bottom hem of the sleeve. In terms of sewing machines, I'm going to be using my overlocker for most of the project, but if you don't have an overlocker, you can just use a sewing machine with zigzag stitch, and then I will also be using a regular machine to finish off the hems of the sleeves. So for the top, I'm going to be using 3 different pattern pieces. The first one is going to be the back of the top, which I'm going to use my round neck top piece from my mix and match tops pattern. And for this one you want to cut 2 pieces, so I'm going to cut one for the main fabric and one for the lining. For the front of the top I'm going to be using my gathered top piece from the same mix and match tops pack. I'm just going to gather it a lot less than I normally would, which is what I'm going to be using the shearing elastic for. This one again, you want 2 pieces to be cut out from your fabric, one for your main fabric and one for your lining. And then the final piece that I'm using is my flared sleeve from my mix and match sleeves pattern. So this one I'm just going to cut 2 from my fabric. I don't need any linings or anything from this one, and when I draw them out I'm going to make sure to draw in a mark for where this central mark is, because this is going to tell me where I'm going to attach it to the top. So I'm going to go in and draw out all of those pieces onto my fabric and cut them out, and then I'll show you what I've got when everything is done. So I've just finished getting all of my pieces cut out. So for my sleeves I've just got my 2 pieces, and for each of them I have marked the central point in place. For the front of my top, I have my piece for my main fabric and then my piece for my lining. And then for my back piece, again, I have my piece in my main fabric and my piece in my lining. So I'm going to start by making the front of the top. So this is the gathered side of the top. And like I said, I don't want to gather it quite as much as I normally would, just because it's going to completely take away from the design. I think if I can gather it just a little bit, it will make the shape a little bit more flattering. So I'm going to take my normal sewing machine and just sew a straight line down the middle with some shearing elastic. I'm going to do that on both pieces. And I'm not 100% sure if I will keep that or not, but if I need to, I can just unpick it if it does take away from the design a little bit too much. So I have the top of my machine threaded up with just a regular thread. And then I'm taking this shearing elastic and I've just taken it around the bobbin by hand, and I'm going to load that in as I normally would. And I'm just picking that up with the thread at the top and pulling that through. So now I'm just going to set my machine to a straight stitch, and I'm going to sew straight down the center of the top. I'm going to make sure I don't tie off the ends or reverse over the ends because I don't want to secure it. And then again, without reversing or anything, I'm just going to pull that off and trim the ends off. And then I'm going to repeat that for my lining piece as well, trying to make sure that you get it in roughly the same area. So this is how those two pieces look now that I've gathered them, and I actually think it works quite well. I don't think this overly takes away from the shapes on the front, so I think I'm going to keep it like this. If I wanted to, I could gather them a bit more by pulling on these strings, or I could pull them out so that I get gathered a little bit less, and then once I'm happy with that, I can tie off the ends, which I'm actually not going to do because I'm just about to sew some seams over these areas, so it's going to secure them in place anyway. So I'm going to take these pieces and lay them one on top of the other with the right sides facing together. And then taking my pins, I'm going to pin around this neckline. And then once my neckline is pinned in place, I'm going to pin along this bottom edge. So I've just finished pinning along that bottom edge as well. I'm going to go in and sew both of those in place of my overlocker. You can use a zigzag stitch as well. In fact, a zigzag stitch might be a little bit easier because these corners are quite tight. So it might be easier to sew down, bring off your machine, and then sew there, bring off your machine, and do it like that. I'm just going to do it with my overlocker. So I'm just going to start by doing the neckline. I'm just going to place that under there. I'm going to slowly follow this line round. And then if you do use an overlocker, or even if you're using a zigzag stitch, I just tend to move this so that the corner just becomes kind of sewn along a straight edge. Just makes it a little bit easier. I'm just going to make sure as I come past these threads that I can just snip them off with my overlocker. Obviously you can just use scissors as well. And then again here for this corner, I'm just going to straighten it out like I did with the other one. And then just snip that off. And then that will look something like that. I'm just going to repeat that for the bottom edge now. So now that I have sewn both of these edges in place, I'm going to take my flat braided elastic. Like I said, this is optional, but it will add a little bit of extra structure. And I'm literally just going to sew that straight on top of the seams that I just sewed around the neckline and along the bottom edge. So just around like this. This will again be a little bit difficult with the tie edges. And I should mention, I'm going to do this on top of the side that is my main fabric rather than my lining, because whichever side I put this on is more likely to peek through to the other side. And these colours are just a tiny bit different, so it's not going to matter a huge amount, but it's just, it makes a bit more sense to put it on the main side rather than the lining. So I'm going to start with the neckline. I'm just going to lay that elastic right on top of there. And place that under my needle, and I'm just going to follow it around. I'm going to use this finger to guide the elastic. Make sure you're not pulling it when you do this. And then again, when it gets to this corner, I'm just going to straighten it out. So I'm sewing a straight line rather than a corner. And then I'm just going to repeat that same thing for the bottom edge as well. So this is how that looks now that I've got my elastic in place, and I've just gone and repeated that with the neckline and the bottom edge for my back piece as well. So the only thing that I haven't done is the gathering. So now I'm going to take this front piece and turn it to the right side out. I'm going to start to attach my back piece to my front piece now. So I'm going to keep this back piece inside out, and I'm going to take my gathered top and I'm going to place this inside my back piece. I want to make sure that the right fabric is facing the right fabric. So here I've got my main fabric facing my main fabric and my lining facing my lining. And I'm just going to start to match up the corresponding edges. So I'm going to start by taking this strap and placing it in the strap of the back piece and just pinning that in place. And then I'm going to repeat the same for the other strap. So here I'm literally just matching up corresponding edges, anything that's not already been sewn in place, like the neckline and the bottom edge, and pinning them in place ready to be sewn. And then I'm going to take the side of that front piece and pass it through to the side of the back, and then just pin that in place as well. And then once all of those edges are pinned in place, I'm just going to go in and sew across each of them with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch. So I'm just going to sew down both sides and across the top of each strap. I'm going to be sewing through 4 layers of fabric in each point here. So this is how that looks once I have sewn along those edges. And I'm going to turn this to the right side out. So now I'm just going to put this to one side for now while I prepare my sleeves. So I'm going to take one of my sleeves and fold it in half. And then I'm just going to pin down this edge. And then once that is pinned in place, I'm going to go and sew along this edge with my overlocker. You can use a zigzag stitch as well. And I'm going to do that for both of my sleeves. So now that I've sewn along that bottom edge, I'm just going to turn this to the right side out. And then I'm going to grab my top and I'm going to turn this inside out now so that the lining is facing out. And I'm just going to take this sleeve and I'm going to find the mark that is my center mark. I'm going to match that up on the inside of this armhole to the strap at the top. So I'm matching that mark there up to this seam here. I'm going to pin that in place. And then I'm going to find that seam that I just sewed in place down the middle of the sleeve, and I'm going to pin that to the side of the top. And now I'm just going to pin the rest of that way around, making sure that I've got the top of the sleeve pinned around the inside of the armhole. And this is with right sides facing together. As long as the sleeve is turned the right side out and the top is inside out, they should be right sides facing together. So then your top should look something like this. Just pinned the top of that sleeve around the armhole on the inside. I'm going to repeat that for my other side. So I've just finished pinning both of those sleeves in place. I'm going to go and sew around that with my overlocker. Again, you can use zigzag stitch. So this is how that looks once I've sewn around the armholes. I'm just going to turn this to the right side out. And now the only thing that I've got left to do now is to finish the bottom edge of the sleeves. So to finish off the sleeve, I'm going to take my interfacing. I'm just going to lay that at the bottom edge and then fold that edge up over the interfacing. And then I'm going to press that in place with my iron. And then once I've done that, I'll show you how it looks, and then I'm going to sew it in place with a zigzag stitch. So this is how that bottom edge looks now that I've pressed it in place with the interfacing. So now I'm going to go and sew this in place with a zigzag stitch. I'm literally just going to follow around this bottom edge on both sleeves. So I've just finished off the sleeves with that zigzag stitch, and then the top is finished. So now moving on to the shorts, I'm going to be using my Emily reversible shorts for this part, and I'm going to be using two different colours that represent two of her different outfits because I didn't know which one to go for. So I've got this kind of reddy colour and this grey colour, so they're going to be on opposite sides of each other, and these are both a 4-way stretch jersey. They're both 95% cotton, 5% elastane. I'm also going to be using pins, some fabric scissors to cut my pattern pieces out, some fabric pens to draw out my pattern pieces, and some 1-inch wide flat braided elastic. This is going to be used for the waistband. I'm going to be using my overlocker for the entirety of this project, but you can just use a normal machine with zigzag stitch instead. So now I'm going to take my two fabrics and I'm going to lay them one on top of the other with right sides facing together. This particular fabric doesn't have a right or wrong side, it's the same on both sides. So I can lay them however, but if you're using two fabrics that do have a right and wrong side, so for example a printed fabric, make sure that the two right sides are facing together. So I've just finished laying my fabric pieces on top of each other. Now I'm going to grab my pattern pieces. So for my Emily pattern, I've got 3 pieces in total. So the first one is the waistband. I'm going to need 4 pieces in total for this one, 2 in each fabric. So I'm just going to draw 2 onto my fabric because obviously I've got the 2 layers. So that's going to give me 1 in each fabric, and then I'm going to draw a second one. For my pocket piece, I'm going to need 8 in total, 4 in one fabric and 4 in the other. So again, I'm just going to draw 4 onto this fabric because I've got the 2 layers of fabric. If you are using a fabric with a right and wrong side, you will need 4 in this orientation with this straight edge facing left, and then you'll need to flip it and draw another 4 in this orientation. So in terms of having the 2 layers of fabric stacked together, you will need to draw 2 out like this, which will give you 4 with the 2 layers of fabric, and then draw 2 out like this with the 2 layers of fabric. And then finally you have your shorts pattern piece, and again you will need 8 of these, 4 in one fabric and 4 in the other. So I'm going to be drawing 4 in total onto my fabric. Again, if you're using fabric with a right and wrong side, you'll need to flip the pattern for half of your pieces, the exact same as the pockets. So I'm going to go in and draw all of those out and then cut them out, and then I can show you properly what I have in each fabric. So just before I cut them out, I'm going to go in with some pins and just pin the 2 layers together within each of these lines, just to make it a little bit easier to cut out identical pieces for each layer. So I'm going to do that for each of the pieces that I've drawn out, and then I'm going to cut them out. So I've just finished getting everything cut out. So I've got 4 of my shorts pieces in each colour. So you can see I've got 2 layers in each one, and there's 4 there, so there's 8 in total. Again, remember that if you're using a fabric with a right and wrong side, that you need to do 2 in the opposite orientation. So you'll need to do 2 that way for each colour. I also have my 2 waistbands, and again I've got 1 in each fabric for each piece, so there's 2 in grey and 2 in red, and then I also have my 4 pockets for each fabric, so 8 in total. And again, the same thing with if you're using a fabric with a right and wrong side, you want to make sure you have 2 for each fabric facing the other direction. So to start off, I'm just going to take 2 of these short pieces and put everything else to one side. So to start off, I'm going to take 2 of these shorts pieces, 1 of the waistbands and 2 of the pockets pieces. I'm just going to put everything else to one side. So starting with my shorts, I'm just going to remove all of the pins from these pieces, and then I'm going to take the red piece from each of these. Doesn't matter which colour you start with, really. I'm just going to do the red because it will be easier to see on camera. And then I'm just going to lay these pieces out flat. And then take this one and lay this right sides facing together on top of the other one. And then I'm going to take my pins and pin down this curved edge here. And then I'm just going to go along this edge and I'm going to sew this in place with my overlocker. You can use a zigzag stitch as well. And then once I've done that, just imagine that bit's all sewn in place. I'm going to take one of my waistband pieces and again just remove the pins and line one of these longer edges up to the top edge of those shorts and pin that in place. And then you can just fold that up and see what that looks like. And then once that's pinned in place, I'm going to do the same thing with going across with my overlocker, and you can use your zigzag stitch for that. And then I'm going to fold that up, and then I'm going to take my pockets and again remove the pins and right sides facing together again. I'm going to pin this straight edge of the pocket just below where I've attached the waistband. And obviously this will be easier if you've already sewn that waistband in place, just to give you an idea. I'm going to pin. So I'm just pinning that straight edge of the pocket down the straight edge of the shorts, and I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So that's the other pocket pinned in place. So now I'm going to go and sew all of those edges in place. So I'm going to start with this curved edge and then the waistband and then the pockets. Obviously it's easier to do this if you sew them before you pin the next piece in place. I just wanted to do it like this because it's a lot quicker to show you what you're doing. So you can go in and sew all of those seams in place. I'm going to use my overlocker. You can of course use your zigzag stitch as well. So this is how all of that looks once it's sewn in place. So I've got the curved edge here in place and then my waistband along the top and then my pockets are also sewn in place. I'm just going to fold those out. And then I've gone in and repeated all of those same steps for my grey piece. So I've got two identical pieces now. I'm going to place them with right sides facing together. So I'm just going to start to match up all of the corresponding edges. And then I'm going to take some pins and pin along this top edge of the waistband. So now that I've pinned along the top of the waistband, I'm also going to pin along this bottom edge. So straight along both bottom edges, but I'm going to leave out this straight edge here. So all the way along the bottom except for this straight part. So I've just finished pinning along this bottom edge, and then I'm gonna go along the top edge and the bottom edge with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch instead. So the only place you want to leave open on this bottom edge is just this straight part here, and then just straight across the top. So this is how that looks when it's all sewn together. So I've got my seam at the top here, and then my seam along this bottom edge, keeping this bit open. So now I'm going to add my waistband to this piece. So there is a section in the Emily pattern that tells you how long this piece of elastic should be. So I'm just going to take this part of the waistband and pin it just in the central area here. I'm only going to pin that at the very end, and I'm only going to pin it through one piece of fabric. So you probably want to make a decision here about which side you're going to wear more often. And for me, it is definitely the red. So I'm going to pin my elastic to this side. So again, with this end of the elastic, just pinning it in the center of that waistband, and just at the very end to one piece of the fabric. So I'm leaving the grey out altogether. So I'm just going to go and sew at the very end there with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch. You don't want to sew anywhere along here or you won't be able to make it reversible. So just this end. So this is how that looks once your elastic is attached. Just zoom in a little bit. I've just sewn it to the very end there, and I've not sewn it to the grey at all. So I can put my hand straight through where the elastic is, and it's just sewn on both ends of the red side. So Once you have finished doing that part, you can go in and repeat all of those same steps for your remaining pieces, and then you can come back and we will finish everything off. So I've just finished repeating all of those steps with my remaining pieces. I'm going to take this one on top and turn it to the right side out. So now you have a piece for the front of the trousers and a piece for the back, and I just need to combine them together. So to do that, I'm going to take this piece that is turned to the right side out and place it inside the piece that is still inside out. You want to make sure that you've got the same fabric facing each other. So here I've got the red fabric facing up for the piece that is the right way out, and the same for the piece that is inside out. So here you'll make sure that the right colours are facing each other. I'm just going to go ahead and start to match up these two pieces with one inside the other, just matching up all of the corresponding edges. So here I'm matching up the waistband of one piece with the waistband of the other, and then I'm going to take this bottom edge of the shorts and pass that all the way through and match it up with the same edge of your other piece. And now I'm just going to start to pin these edges in place. So here at the top, I'm just going to match that waistband up. You should be pinning through 4 layers of fabric here, 2 of the red and 2 of the grey. I'm just going to place a pin in there. And then I'm going to go around these pockets. So again, lining up all 4 layers of the fabric. Might be a little bit tricky to see what I'm actually doing here while it looks like this, but once it's all pinned in place, it should be a lot more clear. Pinning around those pockets. I don't normally make this particularly perfect because I tend to move things about a bit when I am sewing them in place. Especially when you're working with stretchy fabric, you find that you will probably need to do that. And then pinning up the side of the shorts. So that's the one side done. I'm just going to go in and repeat for the other side. So you've got down and round the pocket on this side. Also want to match up this kind of gusset area. So you want to find that part from your other piece and just pin that in place like that. And then I'm going to repeat what I did on this side on the other side, and then I will show you how it all looks. So this is how the shorts should look once everything is pinned in place. So I've pinned down and round that pocket, down the side of the shorts, along this kind of gusset area, and then the same on the other side. So you should have one piece inside the other, and then all the corresponding edges for each piece should be pinned in place. So now I'm going to go in and sew this in place with my overlocker, and of course you can use a zigzag stitch as well. So hopefully you can see I've just sewn all of those edges in place. So just around here, along this bottom edge, and then the same for the other side. So now I just need to turn it to the right side out. So I'm going to unpick a hole in this seam where the shorts attach to the pockets. So now that I've unpicked this hole, I'm just going to gently push the shorts through to the right side. So now I've got these turned to the right side out. All I've got to do is to close up this hole that I've unpicked, and I'm going to do that with a ladder stitch by hand. So for my ladder stitch, I've just got my hole here, and the fabric on each side has kind of folded it in on itself from where it was sewn before. So I'm just going to take my needle and place a stitch at the top of that fold on one side, just one simple stitch and then come over to the other side, trying to keep that as parallel as you can, and then back over to the other side. And I'm just going to keep repeating this. So one stitch at the top of the fold on one side, and then the same across to the other side. And I'm going to do that for the length of the hole, and then I'm going to come back and tie it off at the end so that it's got a double layer of stitch. And then once you've done sewing up that hole, then the shorts are finished. So the last thing I need to make now is the belt, and I've got one for each side that I'm going to make. So this is everything I'm going to be using for the belt for the red side. So I had this fabric custom printed. This is a cotton and polyester blend. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I've got this silver belt buckle that I got on Amazon, and then I've got these 4 red belts that I also got on Amazon. I wanted more of like a reddy browny kind of colour, but I couldn't find any that weren't light brown, so I'm just going to do it red instead. And I bought 4 because I knew that 1 or 2 wouldn't be long enough to go round twice like I wanted to do. And then the only other things that I'm going to be using for this part are some pins, some fabric scissors, and some fabric pens. I'm going to be using my overlocker and my regular machine as well. And then the belt for the grey side, I just bought this one from Amazon, which looks quite similar to the belt in the outfit that I'm going for. And it's just a bit too light, so I'm going to stain this with a dark leather stain. This isn't leather, but I'm just hoping it is going to work. So I'm going to start by making the fabric piece of my red belt. So I've cut out this pattern that's a basic shape of what I want. I'm just going to place that over these images that I've had printed. I might have forgot to mention, but I did get this from Fashion Formula, like the rest of my printed fabric. I'm going to cut this one out, and then I'm going to cut this one out as well. So that's what that looks like once they are cut out. I did cut a little bit outside of the lines that I'd drawn just for a little extra seam allowance. And one tip, if you want to make sure that you've got your pattern piece in the middle, if you've got like a printed design like this, I just cut out the center, so then I could check on each one that this central part was kind of in the same place. Makes it a little bit easier. So now I'm going to sew these two together. So I'm just going to place them right sides facing together. I'm going to use my pins just to pin around these edges. And now I'm just going to sew around these edges with a straight stitch, and I'm going to leave this top edge open just to be able to turn it to the right side out. So I've just finished sewing around those edges. I left the top open so I can turn it to the right side out. So now I'm just going to go in and do a top stitch around the edges with a straight stitch. So I'm just going to follow straight around here, and as I do that, I'm going to fold this top edge in on itself. And then when I go over this area with the top stitch, it will secure it in place. That's what the top stitching looks like around the edge. It's not the neatest job I've ever done, but it will do. So now I'm just going to attach this to my belt buckle. So I'm literally just going to take a hand sewing needle. I'm obviously going to switch out this for a better thread colour. I'm literally just going to place this here and then just sew a loop around either end there. So I just finished sewing the fabric piece in place, and then I realised if I sew it to either end, I can't undo the belt. So instead, I've just ended up super gluing it to the back, which works fine. Now I'm going to take my belts. I actually realised I do only need 2. I don't know why I thought I needed 4. I'm just going to chop off these bits. I'm not going to need them. I'll chop that off the other one as well. And now, using my super glue again, I'm just going to glue that in place there, and then I'm going to take the second belt and do the same thing. So I'm just going to glue them both like that on one side. So I've just glued the first side of the belt in place, and I'm just going to hold it up to myself to see how long I need it, and then I'm going to glue it in place on the other side. But I'm going to make sure that the one that's on the top here is on the bottom on the other side, and the one that's on the bottom here is on the top on the other side, to make sure that it kind of has a bit of a crisscross to help how I want it to sit. So that's my red belt more or less done. I'm just going to put that to the side to dry. And I'm just going to move on to my belt for the other side. So I'm going to take this stain and hope that it works on plastic leather. I think I'm also going to just try it on this fabric as well. It's going to be very messy, but hopefully it's going to work. So this is how the belt has come out after I've stained it. It is a little bit messy, and I haven't done the other side at all because I didn't want to waste the stain, but I think it's actually come out pretty well to say I've used a leather stain and none of this is leather. So now everything is done and I can try everything on.